This is the story of Ussop, my sniper, a guy who wants to be a brave warrior of the sea. So Ussop, right? He was born. He his dad was a gnome pirate called Ussop. See, Ussop is a member of the red-haired pirates. He's their sniper. No wonder Usopp became a sniper, right? His daddy was a sniper, right? So he did that. But he had to leave. He was like, I might have a kid, but my heart's, for the seas. I have to go, adventure with my crew. Usopp's mother, ended up dying when Usopp was like 5 years old, and Usopp was then alone. But he wasn't all alone because he eventually created the Usopp Pirate, which ain't a real pirate group. Just him playing games on an island called Syrup Village. And he was like, he would always spread lies and shit. Like, oh my God, pirates are coming. Hey, y'all, pirates are coming. He did that shit for years. And he had his own flag and other things. And these other little kids, like, followed him around. Um, I think Onion, Tomato, and, like, I don't know. These boys were, like, younger. And he was like, we're the Usopp Pirates. We'll always be, together. And Usopp ran that game for a while until one day Straw Hat Luffy showed up. And Luffy was like, yo, this place is interesting, I guess. But do you know where we could get a ship? And he said, a ship? Hey, I know somebody who get us a ship. I'll get you a ship. That was his girlfriend, Kaya. See, Kaya was a girl who had a sickness. She basically ended up getting sick after her parents had passed away. Clawhador was her butler. Clawhador is not a good guy. Clawhador is a piece of shit basically. He lies about some shit. Um, See, he's actually Captain Kuro of the Black Cat Pirates. See, Usopp discovered this the day he went there. He was like, hey, he was talking to Kai and he's like, these people want a ship. I think you can help them out. But he was like, Clawhador was like, no, you can't be here. Then he started talking shit about Usopp's dad and his past and other things, and Usopp punched him. Later that night, though, Usopp saw him talking to Django, and Django was planning with him to take over and plunder and destroy basically Syrup Village, and take everything, treasure, people, everything, and raid the village. And Usopp was like, he was like, I have to let people know that, this shit's for real this time. There's actually pirates coming. But Usopp lied so many times that people were like, sorry, son, you're playing games too much. There's no pirates coming for us. And he was like, no, but this time they're actually coming. And they were, and, he was like, now, like, people don't believe me and, my village could be destroyed, but I actually love my village and I want to protect it. I can't do it by myself. And then he was like, Luffy and Zoro were like, yes, we'll help you out. And then Nami was like, well, we can help you out if we have, if you give us some cash. You know, you know how she is. But Usopp and Nami ran up on the Black Cat Pirates the next day. And they were trying to hold down. He was shooting his little slingshot at him. He was doing all right until a guy came up on him with a hammer and said, boom. And Usopp was like, ah, fuck. And he was like, hey, man, calm down. I won't let you step foot in that village. And then Usopp got, hit again. Luffy came there then. And he had Kaya run to the forest. Usopp did. Yeah. And Usopp, basically he helped defend his own village with the Straw Hat Pirates, but he wasn't a big, factor in them winning. Not too much. But he wanted to set sail by himself because I don't know. He wasn't confident that he was like able to ride with the tribes. But they were like, calm down, man. You know, you don't have to be alone. You know, you got us the ship basically, and you know, we helped you out. You know, and you can't do that by yourself. You know, you can't like just go out to sea by yourself. You know, survive like that. You might as well just stay with us. And Usopp was like, okay, cool. I get to be the captain, and he was just fucking with Luffy. Um, he was the reason why they got the Jolly Roger right too. Usopp was like, you know, playing games. He was like, here, this is what the Jolly Roger should look like. And then he'd say, here, this is what the real Jolly Roger should look like. And then that became the symbol of the Straw Hat Pirates. So then it was the Baratier. And then after Baratier, Usopp's there and he's like, oh my gosh, Luffy's like getting in trouble with these people already. And they're like, yeah, and that's how Luffy rolls. He kind of just does his own thing. You know, we have to like just bear witness to what Luffy. That's our captain. Usopp's like, okay. But then Zoro fights against Mihawk, and then Usopp's there to like get him out of the water and be like, hey, he's all right. You know, and Luffy's like, yo, go to Kokiyashi Village and get the shit from Nami, because Nami stole the shit because she went to Kokiyashi Village, her village. But she took the Mary with her, and he gets there, and he's like, okay, well, Zoro or Usopp and Zoro like try to do some shit, right? Um, Usopp was, you know, playing games. He saw Kokiyashi Village, and then you know these people. Um, he saw that Ginjo was getting fucked with by um Arlong, and he was like, "You have to pay, you know, payments and shit," and he was gonna kill him. And then Usopp used a slingshot and shot him in the eye, and he was like, "Go get that guy, that long nosed bastard." And then he ran away. He got away from him, but then he got caught. And then when he got caught, he was like, Nami, why are you like working with these people? After all the shit we've been through and other things, you know, what's going on? You know, I thought we were all friends. She was like, we're not friends no more. She acted like she shot Usopp and pushed him into the water. And then Zoro thought that Usopp was done and that Nami turned traitor. But then, you know, Usopp reminded him, he was like, no, Nami, like, you know, helped me get away. You know, something's wrong with her. You know, we need to like figure some shit out real quick. You know, she doesn't really want to be working for those guys and that stuff. But then Usopp pulls up on Arlong Park with you know the likes of Zoro, Sanji, and of course the Captain Luffy, and they were fighting against these pirates. Right? He fought against the guy with the big lips. I don't remember what his name was, but he hit him with a whole bunch of water. Luffy got fucked up. But he was able to place deceptive acts. See, Usopp used ketchup, a ketchup star, to make it look like he was bleeding. And he was like, okay. And then he hit him with the fire star. And then he was like, Usopp, hammer. And that was when Usopp got his first dub in the series. And he was like, yeah. He was like so fucking hyped that he got his fucking dub. He's like, I defeated a fishman. You know, the great Usopp. The great Captain Usopp. And then after that, the crew left that island and they were in Lowtown. They get out of Lowtown and then um, they get to like, you know, they go to the Twin Caves. You know, Usopp's there for all that shit with Laboon. And he's there for the Whiskey Peak shit. You know, he's like trying to impress people with the dart though, and he's like, oh, you know, I'm a sniper and other things, so I have some good aim, you know. But then he's like, you know, asleep like the rest of the crew when the Baroque tries to attack and other things, right? And then they get out of there, and then they're on Middle Garden. And on Middle Garden, Usopp meets a giant named Brogy, one of the, I think he was the Red Ogre or the Blue Ogre, I don't remember, but legendary giant who, you know, has a bounty of 100 million. And he was like, yo, this guy's cool. That's Dorian Broggy. That's that is a giant from Elbaf, war, a true warrior. And I want to be a true warrior of the sea. Elbaf sounds like a cool place to be for somebody like me who wants to be a true warrior, a brave warrior of the sea. And Usopp was like bearing witness to like him cutting down a dinosaur, and then he cooked food for them, him and Nami, and then he was like, okay. But then something happened. Mr. Three intervened in Dorian Broggy's second fight, or first fight actually. Basically, they like exchanged drinks, but in the drinks there was like explosives. Broggy or Dory drank it, and explosives went boom, and he was fucked up. But then the volcano erupted again. Every time the volcano erupts, they have to go fight. So they went and fought each other again, and Dory ended up winning. And he was like, something wasn't right. He wasn't at his full strength. That wasn't a true battle. My friend usually doesn't. He doesn't usually fight like that. Something was wrong with him. And then Mr. 3 was like, ha 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 ha, I fucked with you guys. And then Mr. 5 kicked Usopp's face in or hit him with some a snot bomb, and he was all fucked up. But then Usopp then defeated Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day. He was riding on the back of Karu, and he had his slingshot, and he did that. So after Little Garden, they get to Drum Island, and then they pick up Chopper, and then they get to Alabasta. And Alabasta, they travel around. They meet Ace, you know. Then they get to Rain Dinners, and in Rain Dinners, he's one of the people that get trapped with like Usopp. Usopp gets trapped with Sanji. Well, not Sanji, Zoro, Luffy, and Nami, and Smoker, and Tashigi. And they're all trapped, and then Sanji comes down there to like, let them out, and then the water comes, and then they get out. But then they have to leave to Alabarna because Luffy's like, "Hey, I'll hold down against Crocodile. You guys get out of here. Stop the rebellion and shit. Stop the civil war from happening." When they get to Alabarna, Usopp fights against a guy named Mr. Four, and basically his wife called Miss Merry Christmas, and she, was a mole woman. See, she hopped down into the ground, and she was like, and then she would hop up and like hit Usopp like boom, and like Mr. Four would have his gun like was a dog, and it shoots out like these baseball projectiles, and he hits it with the bat, and then it hits Usopp like boom. Usopp was getting fucked up, but he had Chopper on his side. He hit Mr. Four with the fake 10-ton hammer. He's like, Usopp, 10-ton hammer. Boom. And Mr. Four was a dumbass, and he was like, oh, what the hell? That kind of hurt. And then Miss Merry Christmas was like, calm down, dumbass. That's not even the real hammer. Yeah. Yeah, Usopp was playing games. Then, he's a special attack explosion stars. And he fucks them up. He gets them out of there with the Alpha Chopper. And Usopp catches another dub on Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas. He's like, cool. Then they get out of there. Still don't have a bounty yet. Then they get to Mocktown. And Mocktown, they hear about Mont Blanc Nolan and how the Sky Island does exist and other things. They go up to Skypiea, and Usopp is basically not doing too much up there. He got fucked up by Saturi, who's the weakest of the Divine Generals. He even got shocked by NL twice. See, he got shocked by NL when they were in the upper yard on the Going Merry. He got shocked by NL's lightning, and that's a feat though. Is what I'm saying. Like he was able to survive shit like that. One shocked, and then they got on to Arc Maxim, him and Sanji, and both him and Sanji got shocked twice that arc by NL's lightning. And it was like, and then he got thrown off the ship, and then then he bear witness to Luffy, smashing NL into the Golden Belfry. and then freeing Scorpions and Shandorans alike. Then they drop down from Sky Island and long ring on land, and they fought against Foxy and a Davy back fight. He got his crew members back, Luffy did. But then Aokiji shows up, and they're like, "Oh shit, Aokiji, we have to get out of here." Luffy was like, take everybody and go to the ship because Robin got frozen, and then Zoro and Sanji's leg and arm got frozen. So then, Usopp was like, "You don't gotta tell me twice. We'll get the fuck out of here." That's an admiral. I said, "Boy, we get the fuck out of here." Niggas got fucking Usopp real quick, you know. But then they get to Water 7, and this is where, some sad shit goes down. So Usopp's going with Nami and Luffy to get repairs for the ship. He has money in the suitcase. However, a guy by the name of Cyborg Frankie finds him, and he switches suitcases with him, and he's like, "Yo, I need the money," and then he's like, he got his ass whooped by everybody in the Frankie family. Like, where's that at? But the crew, backed him up, and they went to the Frankie family's house, and they, cleared house, basically, kicked their ass. But then later that night, um, they told Usopp, unfortunately, we have to get a new ship. The Mary is no more. Like it can't be repaired or anything. Like this shit's gonna we can't even make it to the next island. We might be able to make it to the next island, but the one we can't. Um, she's done, brother. And he was like, "What? So you're saying that we have to get a new ship?" And Luffy's like, "Yes, and we will get a new ship because we need to continue this journey. And you have to heed calls to me because I'm your captain." And he was like, "What? No, because that's my girl. She gave me the ship. You can't tell me that this ship hasn't done shit for us when we've gotten this far because of the Mary. She's done all kind of shit for us. And they're like, we're sorry, but it's a hard decision for all of us, but we can't do this. And captain's orders, and then he's like, "Oh, okay, you guys are fucked up. I'll fight Luffy outside, later tonight." And he did. He set up like some traps. Now, Usopp is definitely not he's the weakest member of the crew, but he has a mind, and he creates different things. See, he had like these different dials from Skypiea. He hit him with some smoke dials, and he had like pepper spray, or not pepper spray, um, black pepper stars, and fucking rotten eggs, and then he had cow spikes, played out, laid out on the battlefield, different places, and he hit Luffy with all those. Then he hit him with a Tabasco star, then a fucking explosive star. After he put like gas dials there, and he was like, "I smell gasoline," and he was like, "Special attack, explosion star, boom." He even hit Luffy with the impact dial to the face, but he fucked his arm up too, because it has recoil. And he's like, but everybody knew who was gonna win. Luffy was like, "Oh my god." He's like, "My boy, I knew I was gonna fucking beat you, man. Like I'm your captain, and you know what I'm fucking capable of." And he pulled his arm back, and he fucking smashed Usopp's face in. And Usopp left. But he found Frankie, and Frankie was like, "Yo, I can probably make this ship move one more time, but after this, brother, she's gone. She's done." And then Usopp was like, "I to get her to live like another day is just great. I'll gladly accept what you can do for it." And he's like, "Yeah, I'll help you out." And then CP9 attacked, and they took Cunning Flame, which is Frankie, and they took Nico Robin, and they went to Ennie's lobby. During this time, Usopp went under the pseudonym Sniper King, and he wore a mask, and he had a famous um, slingshot named Kabuto. And he was like, he was with them, and then he got to, the Tower of Justice, before they were like gonna, take Robin, and Luffy's like, "Tell me you want to live," and then Robin was like, "I want to live," and then he was like, "Sniper King, shoot down that flag, the world government flag," And that was him declaring war on them, basically. And they were like, "You just declared war on the whole fucking world, boy. You crazy." And then Luffy's like, "I don't give a fuck. You took my person. You playing games with my dick." Usopp's then linked to like Zoro, and Zoro's trying to fight against Jabra and Kaku, and then he gets unlinked and he almost fucking dies, but then Sanji saves him from Jabra's like fucking claws. And then after that, during the fight with Lucci, Usopp bears witness to Luffy getting his ass kicked, and then Luffy's on the ground after taking Six King Gun to the fucking chest. And he's like, "Luffy, you better not lose. We've been through worse than this. We can get out of here. The sky's still blue. The waves are still raging and shit. Man, we still got, time. We still gotta, like, go do this shit. You're gonna be king of the pirates, aren't you? Aren't you gonna do something? Luffy, you can't fucking lose." And he was like, "If you won't do anything, I'll do something." And he called Rob Lucci Pussycat, and he was like, "Yo, come find me." And then Luffy was like, "Don't do it. You're a dumbass. You'll get killed." And he was like, "What are you gonna do about it? You're sitting on the fucking ground all bloody." And then Luffy got up and he was like, you know, he finished the fight basically because of Usopp's like inspirational words too. Um, but then Usopp was still not a part of the crew though, because Zoro was like, "Hey, he needs to apologize for everything he did, to you and everybody else. You know, he's not a member of the crew yet. He has to come ask you politely to join the crew again. You know, he can't just be a part of the, like, when we leave, he can't just come back on. He has to apologize for everything that he did, going against you and everything. Because if he don't, I'll, like, do something. I'll leave the crew too, because you have to demand respect from your, like, underlings and shit." And he was like, "You're right." So then they ended up trying to leave on the Sunny, and then Usopp was still on like the island, and he was like, um, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything I said. Of course I want to be a part of your crew still. I'm your sniper and shit." And then Luffy was like, "Take my hand," and he pulled him back onto the ship, and then he was part of the crew again. Um, but yeah, then they got to Thriller Bark, and Thriller Bark, Usopp was running around. He ended up fighting against a girl named Perona. See, she used a move named Negative Hollow. She used it on Zoro, Sanji, and Frankie. It actually affected them, but for Usopp, it didn't affect him. See, because Usopp always has a negative mindset. He's like, "Oh my God, we're here, and all this bad shit can happen to us. Our captain's foolish. We're gonna, we could die here and all this other stuff." So when the negative ghost went through him, like nothing happened. He was basically immune to it. Using his fucking slingshot, he was able to, like, play games with Persona for a little bit. She had a corpse with her, but then she got beamed away, and Usopp was trying to hold down with the crew, and Oars came around and other thing. He got knocked the fuck out when Kuma showed up and like used Ursa Shock. Boom. He was one of the ones that fucking just was out. Then they got to Sabaody, and at Sabaody, Usopp was there, you know, just like everybody else, Then tragedy struck because Luffy hit the Celestial Dragon, and then Kizaru showed up, and then Kizaru tried to fight against them, and Kuma showed up, and Kuma sent Usopp second. He sent away Zoro first, and then Usopp. Usopp got sent to an island. Herculean, or whatever his name is, trained Usopp. Usopp got fat. But he got the message from Luffy, like, not in 3 days, but in 2 years we'll meet in Sabaody. And he's like, "I hear you. Now I have 2 years to train and get all this fat off of me," because he became fat. But the 2 year time skip passes, and then Usopp ain't fat no more. He has a little bit of muscle tone, and he even has like a little bit of some facial hair and stuff. He's cool. You know, he uses these like plant stars that he got from the island. He can summon like plants with and shit. He started to protect Nami a little bit, and he's like, "Okay, we'll go down to Well, they were like, we're going to Fisherman Island now. He goes to Fisherman Island, and in Fisherman Island, he held down with Nami against some fodder, because he's one of the weak links, another thing. And he's like, okay, we did that, we fucking held down, we showcased our abilities a little bit. And then Luffy's like, we have to get to the next island, get to the new world, and Punk Hazard was there. And Punk Hazard, I'm trying to remember. Usopp, he got to disembark with Luffy and shit. Uh, he didn't do too much of that. Then in Dressrosa, that's where he like kind of shined. Him and Nico Robin in Dressrosa, like they met the Tontatas, and the Tontatas gave him a name, the Great Usulin, and he was, great. And they went and they led the Tontatas to like fight against on the assault against Doflamingo and the Don Quixote family, because the Tontatas are always a part of the like island. Like they always lived on Dressrosa. They were cool with previous kings, but then when Don Quixote Del Flamingo came on and they fucked shit up, um, and they're like, we need to take this shit back. You know, Riku needs to like reclaim the throne and other things because that's what's needed. And Usopp was like, I'll help you guys out. He was able to snipe down Sugar, from afar. He used some hockey abilities. He was able to do that. And also, and she was like a big part of Doflamingo clan. She was turning people into like toys and other shit, and then Usopp like got a shot off on her. And he was able to like turn people back to human. So many people got turned into toys and shit, and he was like, he saved them basically. And he was one of the people that stayed with Luffy to fight against the Don Quixote family. And then Usopp then got a bounty of fuck. I think it was 300 million. After that, after that whole like fiasco, or it was 200 million or 300 million. But that was the highest his bounty had ever been. And he was like, oh shit, I'm getting the big boys, hundreds of millions. They get to Zoe, and then Luffy's like, you can go with, Law to Wano, and he went to Wano. And in Wano, he becomes like this, like, doctor who, like, gives out medicine and other things. But, like, it's really, he's showing a moon crescent, a reverse crescent moon, I think, on his, like, um, ankle. And he's like, yo, um, the uprising against Kaido is going to happen. The Akazai and Nine are assembling again. And he was getting the message to like all these like former samurai, and they're like, "Oh shit, these niggas are back. We're gonna finally take back Wano from that nigga Kaido. His head's gonna finally roll." And he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna meet and we're gonna raid Onigashima and all kind of shit." He was like part of like he was getting like the word out to like different people in Wano that it was time to like take their shit back. And that happened. Usopp was then thought to be dead, and then Luffy, fought against Kaido, and then Kaido took Luffy in. Um, then they, raid Onigashima, and when they raid Onigashima, Usopp fights against Page One, and Ulti with Nami. He gets fucked up though, pretty sure. You know, he tells her, he tells Nami not to like, say anything, too fucked up to Ulti or she'll kill her. He was like, yo, Nami, don't say anything that could get you killed, because Nami was like, I would never talk down about Luffy, that's my captain and shit. And then Ulti was like, smashing her with the head and other things, and then Usopp was like, don't do that, you need to don't say something that'll get you fucking killed. You know, and he was able to like hold down a little bit there. but he didn't do anything significant too much. You know, it was thought he thought some people thought that he used Conqueror's hockey on them. He was like, because like Big Mom was around and she used Conqueror's hockey, and then like he made like or she made a whole bunch of people pass out. But like to the like eyes of other people, it looked like he did, and he was like, oh shit, you know. And Usopp's one of those people that like kind of like Buggy. He gets hyped from like what people think he did. Sometimes, but sometimes he like does shit. Like he burnt down that flag in Annie's lobby. He like stopped Sugar and Dressrosa. And he fought against Page One and OT with Nami. But then you know his bounty goes up to 500 million, I believe. Right, and then he's like, "Oh my fucking god, you know that's a big fucking bounty for me." That shit's crazy. But he's a sniper of the Straw Hat Pirates, so you know they got that nigga on a quick scope from like distance. Like that's a problem later on in the series, man. I don't know. Usopp needs to get more like fights and more, you know, like he's gonna probably fight against Von Augur and shit from Blackbeard Pirates eventually. But on Egghead, he's turned to stone and shit by Seraphim of Boa Hancock. She turns him to stone, and he's like, and that's where the anime is right now. As of these recent episodes, but it's coming back soon, y'all. It'll be back, next week, I think. With two episodes, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. I think that's how it's ran, or Friday and then Saturday, either one of those two. But Usopp, even though he's a weak link, he's still necessary for the crew. He's their guy that takes he takes like shots from a distance and shit. Other niggas can't do that. Like not even like Frankie. Frankie, his bullets are like more close range shots and other things, but he specializes in long distance attacks. You know, and other crews have snipers too. Without him, they wouldn't have a sniper. So I'm like, and then he was also like a secondary shipwright too, to like help repair things, and also like an invention creator. Like he gave Nami the Climatat. He got her the Climatat so she could fight, and that's her like weapon to defend herself, and she always uses it. So he is important, but it's Usopp. He's gonna be a brave warrior of the sea eventually, but at what point is he gonna like take down somebody like notable and shit? That's when like he's gonna get like really recognized and shit, as like, okay, that's Usopp. He set out to do this, be a brave warrior of the sea. That's who he is. You know, maybe Elbaf or some other fucking arc will show that about Usopp. But stay cool, Claw in the corner, because that's the life of Usopp up until this point.